Did you know that one man is solely responsible for kick-starting the entire Protestant Reformation that would eventually lead to hundreds of millions of people leaving the Roman Catholic Church? Well, if you didn't know this before, you're about to find out. I'm your host, and you are watching this channel where we explore the strange, unusual, and sometimes scary world of early modern history. We need to do some world building because we need to understand the world in which Martin Luther lived so we can see what led him to become the goat herder. No pun intended there. Okay, no, yes, there was. Okay, moving on. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most important figures in all of early modern history, Martin Luther. As we discussed in our video about indulgences, the church had gotten into the business of selling indulgences, which were basically pieces of paper that granted Christians forgiveness for their sins. These were incredibly popular with the wealthy who could afford to buy them because it gave them an easy way to get out of doing the hard work of, not sinning or atone for their sins through charity or penance. The basic idea was that if you had enough money, you could just buy your way into heaven, which kind of undermined the whole point of going to church in the first place. It was broadly divided into two spheres of influence, the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of France, with Spain thrown in for good measure. Basically, overnight, copies of Luther's 95 Theses were being circulated all over Germany, and soon the rest of Europe. But he didn't. In 1520, he excommunicated Luther, which formally kicked him out of the church. The Holy Roman Emperor also got involved and ordered Luther to recant his statements. This would lead to a complete breakdown of the social order. And look, these guys liked the social order just fine, thank you very much. So instead, they allowed Luther to live out the remainder of his days in comfortable obscurity, because it seemed to undermine the entire point of Christianity. Well, Luther argued that God's forgiveness was freely available to all Christians and didn't require the church's permission. This meant that Christians were no longer dependent on the church for their salvation, and that fundamentally changed the relationship between the church and its followers. Well, hold on to your copy of Das Kapital because Luther basically came up with his own version of communism, except instead of abolishing private property, he abolished private salvation. This meant that Christians were no longer bound by the teachings of the church, and they were free to interpret the Bible for themselves. This led to a proliferation of new Christian denominations, including Presbyterianism, Baptist, Methodism, and many others. But Luther refused, and the stage was set for the Peasants' War of 1524 to 1525. This caused quite a stir in both the religious and secular worlds. Sorry. Okay, here's what happened. His translation of the Bible into German helped make literacy more widespread, and his emphasis on individual piety led to the development of new forms of worship, like the personal Bible and regular prayer. When Luther refused to back down, the peasants got fed up with the church and decided to take matters into their own hands. Led by charismatic preachers like Thomas Müntzer, the German peasants rose up in arms and killed thousands of nobles and clergy. This alarmed the German princes, who quickly put down the rebellion and executed many of the leaders. But it showed just how powerful Luther's ideas were becoming. Many people agreed with Luther, especially the poor, who felt that the indulgence peddlers were taking advantage of them. And that created a huge theological crisis for the Catholic Church. And then after that, he started the Lutheran Church, which split off from the Catholic Church and became its own thing. Parish priests were actually pretty much forbidden to sell indulgences in their churches, and many of them complained bitterly about the abuses of the system. See, Luther was an Augustinian friar, which means that he was part of a holy order founded by Saint Augustine of Hippo that focused primarily on scholarship and theology. 1517. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't he just post them on the door of the Vatican? And that's a great question, but he wasn't trying to get the attention of the Pope. He was trying to get the attention of his fellow German scholars. Remember, Luther was a professor at a university, and this was a common way to start a debate among scholars. He wanted feedback from other experts on his theses. And then once he got it, he would write a response and post that on the church door, too. It was like a medieval Twitter thread. He was a professor at the University of Wittenberg, which was in the electoral state of Saxony. And as such, he had both the leisure time and freedom from his local lord to speak out against the sale of indulgences without fear of reprisal. But they were in a precarious position because they relied on the goodwill of their local lord to keep their job. And many of these lords were perfectly happy to take advantage of their parishioners by selling them indulgences. And while these were political entities, they were also thoroughly religious entities as well. I mean, remember, we're talking about a time when the Pope not only was the head of a global religion, but was also a major player in European politics. You can't really divorce the two in this period. So, if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, let's get into it. Because today we're gonna be talking about Martin Luther and how he single-handedly changed the course of Christian history forever. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Now, before we talk about the big bad heretical Gotharder himself, so in order to understand Luther, you have to understand the state of Europe during the early 16th century. Now, the Holy Roman Empire was made up of hundreds of semi-independent states and was basically held together by the power of the Catholic Church. In fact, the emperor was elected by the College of Cardinals and was generally chosen from among the ranks of the German princes. This meant that the German emperors weren't really dynastic monarchs like the French kings were. They were more like elected officials, and their power was pretty limited. In reality, the real power in the empire lay with the princes who controlled the various semi-independent states within its borders. This brings us to our next topic of discussion, the Catholic Church. Not everyone in the church was a fan of this practice, especially those who actually did their jobs. Enter Martin Luther, a German friar who became increasingly disturbed by the sale of indulgences. He wrote his 95 Theses in 1517, which outlined his argument against the sale of indulgences and posted them on the door of the castle church in Wittenberg on October 31st. But unlike a Twitter thread, this one went viral. The Pope had the option of ignoring Luther and hoping that the whole thing would just blow over. Okay, sidebar time. What the heck am I talking about? Peasants' War. I thought this was a video about Martin Luther. In the end, Luther was never imprisoned or executed for his views, probably because the princes realized that if they did, other scholars across Germany would follow his lead and start questioning the authority of the church. Except he didn't go into obscurity. He translated the Bible into German and helped start the Reformation, which eventually led to the creation of Protestantism. So now let's bring things full circle. Remember how we talked about how the sale of indulgences was a big problem for people? What do I mean by that? Well, remember how we talked about how people would buy indulgences to forgive themselves for their sins? In addition, Luther argued that the Bible was the ultimate authority in matters of faith, not the Pope or any other religious leader. In addition to his religious reforms, Luther also had a profound impact on the cultural and intellectual life of Europe. So, to sum things up, Martin Luther was kind of a big deal. Thanks for watching, everyone.